Hey guys, welcome back to another video. If you've ever taken a pole class before, you may have heard your instructor reference a push and a pull component of your upper body when you're initiating spins. Now, a common thing that I will see beginners and even more advanced pole dancers struggle with is proper placement of the top pulling arm. And that's going to be the focus of today. Now, I find that the term top pulling arm is a little bit too vague. It's a little too vague because it just leaves students up to the assumption that they're supposed to pull. And intuitively, a lot of that pulling is going to come from the wrong muscle group. The main muscle that I'm talking about that shouldn't be working quite as hard is the bicep. In my classes, I actually refer to this top arm as the top tension arm because I feel like that gives people a little bit better visualization of a sensation that they should actually be feeling when they're setting up that top pulling arm rather than just guessing and leaning into the bicep. In reality, what we actually want to be doing on many spins is we want to be using the bicep as least as possible. And you might call me a liar looking at maybe my arms, but if you catch a glimpse of my back and my shoulders, you're probably going to get the picture pretty clearly who's actually carrying the team here. Now, to be more specific about which muscle groups are actually supposed to be pulling you with that pulling component of your upper body, I'm talking about your scapula and your shoulder primarily. These muscles are way more powerful combined than that one little bicep that you've been relying on way too much. Now, if you can effectively tap into, strengthen, and control the scapula and shoulder in your pull moves, you have unlocked a great skill. So why do I call it top arm tension? Well, it's a sensation that you can actually feel if you set that top arm up correctly. You should be feeling a pull, kind of a stretching feeling all throughout the shoulder and the lat as you reach up for your pull and then you bear your weight down through it and resist that. Now, if you'd like to see exactly what I'm talking about, you can go ahead and go up next to your pole, place yourself right next to the side of it, reach up as high as you can. I'm actually on the front pads of my feet, so all the way up on my toes. I'm gonna get a firm grasp on my pole, not gonna move my hand, and I'm gonna sink ever so slightly. You barely see me sinking down, but maybe you can kind of see my lat popping out a little bit more. And right here, what I'm feeling is a lot of that stretching and that tension, pulling feeling all along the shoulder and down to my side here on the right for me. So now let's say that you just set that up with improper form, with a lot of slack. So slack would look like this. You can see my elbows kind of bent. If I was to engage that same shoulder and lat and scapular region, I would actually be able to do that, but you can see that that does practically nothing for me in the vertical plane lift. So kind of a useless motion if I have a lot of slack, i.e. bend in my elbow. So then if you approach the pull with a lot of slack in your top pulling arm, and let's say you're just going to be going into a fireman, for example, not a lot of pulling is going to be happening in my shoulder and my back region. So a lot of that's going to fall onto this bicep right here. So if I actually go into it, my fireman looks a little bit more like a struggling pull-up rather than it does a beautiful fireman that it could be if that top arm was fully elongated. So essentially what you've done when you've completely elongated and straightened out that elbow is you've actually turned off the biceps ability to activate, which is really cool. And then the only thing that can activate and resist against the tension that you've built up because you've stretched and elongated out this shoulder and lat region is the shoulder and the scapula that are gonna kind of suck that shoulder socket back into the shoulder region, which is then going to become your vertical pull. Rather than if I had that slack, here it is, that elbow starts bending. It's a slight movement, but I can always catch it as an instructor. And it's hard for people that are beginners or not so familiar with this concept to catch it themselves. But as soon as I bent that elbow, I felt, and my body and my brain could feel that this bicep right here, it's like, oh, I want to take over in this movement. Yes, my shoulder and my scapula can still engage, but the bicep, now that that elbow has been bent, has been called upon to work more, and it will work more. And unfortunately, it's not as strong, again, as the scapula and the shoulder are combined. And it's also not as great at endurance, so it's going to fatigue fairly quickly as to when I compare the same endurance level of the scapula and the shoulder. Far, far, far superior pulling vertical plane muscles found in there. So let's go ahead and look at the ideal placement of that top pulling arm here, breaking it all the way down. Again, the tension arm is reaching high up with a hand that doesn't slip down. You have no broken lines in this arm, meaning no bend in the elbow, and my elbow is rotated facing forwards. This will effectively turn off the bicep. And then we have to engage the scapula in a depression and retraction. So think of pulling the scapula down and back, even though anatomically it wants to be pulled up due to the weight of your body pulling it down. The same applies to the shoulder. As it is in the state of flexion above your head, it too resists the weight of your body. This is best felt with your body next to the pole so that your bodily load is aligned directly under where your scapula and your shoulder are pulling towards. So now let's look at arm with slack. Firstly, your hand is not very secure, so tension can be lost. Your elbow has a bend, which welcomes the bicep to take the lead, and my elbow is not rotated forward. You're also probably too far from the pole for your shoulder and back to engage to even make a difference. This is why, as a beginner or a more advanced pole dancer who is not used to this concept needs to be meticulous about setting up their spins correctly before initiating them. I have taught my fair share of very strong individuals some pole dancing, and it is all too common that they rely way too much on their biceps to do various tricks. Now, they can absolutely get into anything they want because they have a lot of strength, but I'll tell you right now, it looks pretty dang ugly. It looks kind of like I was talking about with that broken up fireman, kind of like a struggling pull-up on the pole. So kind of like when we're pointing our toes, we want to have nice lines in the upper arm. A lot of brokenness is going to make our spins look a little less flowy and not quite as aesthetically pleasing. Another issue that I will find as an instructor, especially prevalent on spin pole, is when students jump into their spins. And I know a few of you are probably guilty of that. But what that does, and let me back up for a minute, there is no possible way that you can get proper top arm tension while jumping into a spin. First of all, jumping into a spin move doesn't look great unless like there's actual meaning behind it. If you're actually jumping into a spin move just to get some momentum going, yeah, it's probably an area that you need to work on a little bit. So because of most people's inability to find top arm tension after jumping into a spinning move, let's say, oftentimes the bicep will either take control over the movement, which is something that we talked about that doesn't look so well and it exhausts someone pretty easily, or the bicep will fail. And when the bicep fails, all of that failure is then brought right back onto your shoulder and rotator cuff and all those tendons. Over time, if not immediately, you will be injured in that region. And it is possible to not jump into a spinning move and still injure yourself if you don't know how to properly engage that shoulder and scapula muscle that I was talking about. Or you're just actually not physically strong enough to hold that, but you do know the proper engagement mechanism. Once again, if either you're not sure how to engage properly or you're not physically strong enough to properly engage, those tendons, the rotator cuff tendons specifically, are at a high risk of damage. And shoulder injury in pole dance is very, very prevalent. And that's why I'm kind of really harping on this point to you guys. So then how do you not be that person? How do you not be that person that is prone to injury in their shoulder region? Well, you have to train it. And if you're a beginner or you're completely new to this whole concept of finding tension in that top arm, chances are you need to start with the foundations. My first question for you is, are you even flexible to get into a full-on state of flexion with that inside pulling arm? So when I say flexion, I mean any time where this inside arm, let's say, is coming above my head, right next to the side of my ear, and it is able to reach in and grab the pole. I should be able to do this, right? If I don't have the mobility to do that, then that's probably where you should start in this process. And then next, of course, is actually going to be getting familiar with the sensation that you should be feeling when you are properly engaging the scapula and the shoulder together. So this is where we focus on lower weight, higher rep exercises. So a good one to try out could be a single lat pull down. So setting your resistance to a very low value and engaging and disengaging the scapula and shoulder. Once you engage, hold this for a few seconds and release. This is not so much to build strength, but rather a means to build neural connections with the correct region of the body. It will also build your tendon strength. Yes, you can actually do that. And the exact same exercise can be done on the pull as well to mimic that lat pull down. You would just set that hand right up here. And then again, with that little resistance, you want to come up and down off the heels of your feet. And then practicing, engaging, holding, and then slowly releasing back down. Another exercise is dead hangs. I spoke on these quite a bit in my grip strength video, so if you downloaded that PDF guide for that, you've already gotten ahead of the game there. Slightly tweaking the dead hang or assisted dead hang, we'll hang through the shoulders and send the scapula and shoulder back towards the ground in a depression and retraction state. Pause for as long as you can and repeat. Once again, we're not building strength, so keep the reps high. If you feel more confident finding tension in your upper arm and know how to resist against it with the shoulder and scapula, you're ready to actually strengthen that area. So the prep work to get to this phase of actually strengthening this area might take weeks, days, or months for you. So really be honest with yourself if you know how to properly engage the region that I'm talking about. If mentally and physically you're not quite with it on this movement, you do put yourself at risk for injury. So be honest and constantly be scanning all of these regions for any pain that you might be experiencing if you do start strength training this area. Both the single arm and tweaked dead hangs can be used to build strength. The difference is the load we apply and the reps. We'll want to stay at a lower rep range of 3 to 5, let's say, and veer away from the notion that it needs to burn or you're not working hard enough. It should be difficult for you to perform these 3 to 5 reps, but it shouldn't be like a burning sensation that you would feel in a typical hypertrophic workout. Just be hitting this rep range because your body can't quite physically complete the rest of the full set that you had in mind doing. This is also a phase where we can incorporate a lot more pull work. So one of my favorite strength training exercises is a two-handed spin. A lot of these pull moves are isometric holds, so you're just holding in place until your body kind of exhausts itself. Again, with these, I like to repeat them for 3 to 5 reps. And these can also be completed on static as well. Reaching all the way up with that inside top tension holding arm, and then having the outside, I can come all the way off the ground using the same mechanisms that I was talking about. And then of course you can do the same with one hand instead of 2. This is much harder, but same thing. Just coming off the ground and lifting up with that shoulder. And training with those one-handed static holds was actually key to me being able to do my one-handed spin. Whenever you are in class or you're practicing pole dance in general, you are generally strengthening that top arm tension that I'm talking about. And so yes, it does get better naturally on its own over time, but like anything else, you can increase the rate of your progression if you're actively training it. It's just like in that grip strength video, if you train outside of just having fun on the pole, you can see a lot quicker rate of progression in your pole dance. Also, another note on that single-handed spin that I've been getting a lot of questions about, it does require quite a bit of grip strength as well, not just a whole bunch of engagement here. If you haven't seen my grip strength training video, I would go ahead and check that out. Also on that specific trick, please be very careful. Just know that the human body definitely doesn't know how to intuitively hold in a position like that in most cases. So you want to be very, very careful with that particular move. Don't just throw yourself into it and just be hanging all the way up 10 feet up in the air and rip all your rotator cuffs. That is not what I want for you. Slow progression. Make sure that your body and your mind are both prepared for a crazy intense move like that one. And that top tension arm could also be on the outside as well. So this one here, let's say you're going into your back knee hook like that. You still want to feel that same amount of tension just on the outside arm instead of the inside. But the same mechanisms apply. You're still engaging the same muscle groups. It feels a little bit different, but it's the same kind of technique. I myself have noticed a drastic difference in students who continuously train with the proper engagement of the pulling arm, and then those who kind of don't listen to that information and continue to rely on the bicep or don't actively train or get a mind-muscle connection with the proper mechanisms of that top arm. So don't be that person. It just takes a little bit of coordination with your body, figuring out what works, that little light bulb moment. Keep practicing it. It will come to you eventually, and once you get it, you're really gonna be happy that you found it.